In the southeastern heart of the land now known as Nigeria, cradled by red earth and the steady rhythms of ancestral drums, there was a village named Umudike. It was not famous beyond its borders. You wouldn't find it on the maps of city folk. But to those who lived there, it was the center of the world. The sun always rose gently in Umudike, casting golden fingers over the thatched rooftops, stirring goats and chickens into motion. Smoke curled from cooking fires before the dew had even dried on the cassava leaves. Life moved with the quiet certainty of a drumbeat, predictable, measured, and full of song. In the middle of this village lived a woman known far and wide as Mama Nkem. Now, Mama Nkem was not rich in coin, but she was wealthy in a different way. Her compound was clean, her yam barn was always stocked, and her words held more weight in the village council than most men. She had strength in her back, wisdom in her tongue, and a heart that beat only for her son, Obinna. Ah, Obinna. Obinna was her only child, born after 3 miscarriages and many nights of tears under the moonlight. When he finally arrived, the old women of the village called him Enwachi, a child favored by the spirits. And indeed, he grew like a tree watered with sacred hands. He was tall, with skin the color of rich mahogany, and a smile that could melt the salt of dried fish. He spoke gently but with firmness, and walked the farm beside his mother without complaint. His laughter was loud and free, so full of life that even the elders often paused to smile when they heard it. Mama Nkem, they would say, "You have raised a king." And Mama Nkem would laugh modestly and say, "He is my only jewel. Let me polish him well." But beneath her pride, there was something else, something quiet and watchful. She never let Obinna sleep too late, nor did she ever miss a market day. She taught him not only how to plant yams, but also how to read the wind and listen to silence. Some said Mama Nkem had the gift, that she saw things others could not. After all, her grandmother had been a renowned dibia, a woman of medicine and dreams. The old spirits didn't let go of bloodlines easily. It was during the season of the first rains that things began to shift. No one noticed. Why would they? The rains came late that year, but they came nonetheless. The earth drank, the women danced in the fields, and laughter returned to the streams. But in Mama Nkem's heart, sleep began to escape her. It began with whispers, dreams that faded the moment she awoke. Sometimes she'd hear her name being called in the dead of night, soft as wind brushing raffia leaves. Other times she'd wake with her wrapper soaked in sweat, heart thudding like the village drum. "Chi, she whispered one morning, clutching her chest. "What is this thing crawling into my peace?" She thought of going to the priest of Ani, the earth goddess, but something held her back. Not fear, no. It was deeper than that. A knowing, a stirring in the bones that mothers inherit from the first womb that ever birthed the child. Obinna remained oblivious. Every morning he rose, bathed at the stream, and headed to the farm. Sometimes he would return humming songs. Other days he brought back fresh catfish or wild mangoes. He moved through life as if the world owed him nothing, and because of that the world gave him peace. But Mama Nkem watched him with eyes that had seen too many seasons. She noticed how he paused at the edge of the bush path some evenings, how he sometimes looked behind him without knowing why, how just once he returned with a strange mark on his shoulder, like the brush of fingers not quite human. And that night, for the first time, the dream came clear. She was standing in the middle of a thick forest. The trees loomed over her like watching ancestors. The air smelled of charcoal and wet leaves, and in the clearing stood a woman, tall, veiled in smoke, her eyes glowing like fireflies in the dark. The woman pointed at Mama Nkem's chest and said, "Your son walks into a trap set by beauty. Warn him, or lose him." Then she vanished. Mama Nkem woke up with a scream stuck in her throat. The cock had not crowed. The air was still. She sat on her mat, clutching her wrapper, breath shallow and eyes wide. She stared into the shadowed corners of her heart and said aloud, "He is all I have. You spirits, hear me. I will not sit and watch the wind carry him away." Outside, a wind stirred the banana leaves, though the night was still. And so the story began: a mother, a son, a warning from beyond, and a love so dangerous it almost broke everything. From the moment Mama Nkem had that dream, something in her spirit shifted. She was no longer just watching over her son, she was guarding him. But how do you protect a grown man from something you can't touch, or name, or prove? She didn't tell Obinna about the dream. No. He would laugh it off, or worse, think she was growing old and paranoid. So instead she began to pray harder, speaking to the ancestors every dawn before the village stirred. She laid fresh kola nuts on her husband's grave. She tied red cloth around the udala tree, a symbol of protection. And she sprinkled salt mixed with charcoal ash at the four corners of their compound, an old defense her grandmother had once taught her. But Obinna was a young man in love with life, and soon he would be a young man in love with something far more dangerous. It happened on a market day in the neighboring village of Oba Allah, a place known for its skilled weavers and the beautiful women who sold dyed wrappers by the roadside. Mama Nkem didn't go with him that day. She had fallen ill with a pounding headache and swollen feet. "I'll bring you goat meat from the roast stand," Obinna had said, flashing his easy smile. "And that pepper you like, the one from Neka's stall." She nodded, half distracted by the pounding in her skull, unaware that this would be the day everything changed. Obinna returned late that evening. He had no goat meat, no pepper. He walked into the compound like a man floating above the ground. His eyes glazed, his voice softer than usual. "Mama," he said, "I met someone." Those three words struck her like lightning. Her headache vanished, her weariness disappeared. She sat up slowly, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" she asked. "What someone?" Obinna's smile widened. "Her name is Ngozi. She's different, not like other girls. When she speaks, the world gets quiet." Mama Nkem's heart clenched. "What village is she from?" "She says she's from across the river Enu, but I didn't recognize the name, somewhere far." Mama Nkem's eyes darkened. "And what business does a girl from far away have at Oba Allah's market?" Obinna laughed gently. "Mama, not every stranger is danger." But she said nothing. She only nodded and excused herself to the back hut where she kept her charms. That night she waited until he slept and lit a clay lamp by her sleeping mat. She placed 3 cowries on the floor and whispered a question into the flame. "Is this girl a gift or a test?" The middle cowrie flipped on its own. A test. For the first time in many years, Mama Nkem trembled. The following day, Obinna was gone before she woke. He had gone to see Ngozi again. She waited. She didn't eat, she didn't weave. She didn't speak to the women who came by. When he returned at dusk, she was waiting at the gates. "Bring her," she said simply. Obinna blinked. "Mama, bring the girl. I want to see her face." He hesitated but eventually nodded. 2 days later, Ngozi came and Mama Nkem's heart nearly stopped. The girl was beautiful, yes, that much was true. But it was the kind of beauty that didn't feel soft or human. Her skin was too smooth, her walk too quiet, like a wind that moves without touching the grass. Her eyes, oh her eyes, were too steady for someone so young. They didn't dart like a maiden's should. They held still, like water that doesn't ripple even when a stone is thrown. Mama Nkem offered her food, Ngozi declined. She offered her palm wine, Ngozi refused. She tried small talk. Ngozi smiled politely but never asked a question back. By the end of the visit, Mama Nkem's stomach was twisting like a snake in a clay pot. That night, the dream returned. The forest, the smoke, the woman. But this time, the woman's face was clearer, older, wiser, like the face of a river that's seen too many drownings. She spoke once more. "She is not what she appears to be. The son will not see it. The mother must." Mama Nkem woke up screaming. She could no longer stay silent. She called Obinna to her mat at sunrise. "My son," she said, "I need you to listen to me with the ears of your spirit, not your flesh." He frowned. "Mama, what's wrong?" "I've seen her in my dreams, that girl. She walks with shadows behind her. She carries something that does not belong in this world." Obinna chuckled softly. "Mama, please, Ngozi is just a girl." "No," she said firmly. "She is not just a girl. I am your mother. I don't say these things lightly." Obinna stood up, frustration clouding his face. "You want to decide who I can love? I want to keep you alive." He stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "You're afraid of things you don't understand." and he walked away. Mama Nkem watched him disappear down the path with a weight in her chest that no chant could lift. That night, the moon did not rise, and Mama Nkem knew something was coming. From that day forward, Obinna was no longer the same. He still worked the farm, yes. He still fetched water from the stream and split firewood with his calloused hands. But his spirit seemed elsewhere. His body moved through Umudike, yet his mind wandered across the river, chasing a girl with no history, no family, and eyes too deep for her years. Mama Nkem noticed the small changes first. He stopped attending the evening gatherings with his age mates. He no longer whistled while tending the goats. His smiles became distant, like they were borrowed from memory. When she asked him simple questions, how he slept, what he ate, what the village boys were planning, he would nod vaguely or mutter distractedly. Then came the announcement that broke her heart. Mama, Obinna said one evening as they sat under the orange glow of the cooking fire, I want to marry Ngozi. Her hands froze over the soup pot. The wooden spoon trembled slightly before she set it down. You've only known her for a few moons, she said, voice calm but brittle. When you saw Papa, how long did it take to know? He asked gently. Mama Nkem looked into the fire and said nothing. Obinna pressed on. She makes me feel, oh, like everything I've waited for is now here, for me alone. Mama Nkem met his gaze then, her eyes dark as the night sky. And what do the gods say now? He didn't answer. She sighed and rose slowly, her bones creaking with the burden of motherhood. If you must bring her into this house, then do so with your chest open and your eyes wide. But remember this, Obinna. Not all who smile at you mean you well. Even fire warms the hand before it burns it. But Obinna had already made up his mind. Within 2 weeks, a small marriage ceremony was held. It was quiet, too quiet. Ngozi arrived without parents, without siblings, with only a distant uncle from another village who barely spoke. The bride price was accepted without negotiation. No drums were played. The village elders mumbled their blessings half-heartedly, and several women whispered behind folded wrappers. Still, the union was sealed. And that night, as Ngozi entered Mama Nkem's compound as a wife, the crickets stopped chirping. Mama Nkem slept with one eye open. At first, everything seemed tolerable. Ngozi cooked well. She cleaned, she fetched water. She even knelt to greet Mama Nkem every morning. Her smile was warm enough, her voice soft enough, and yet there was something missing. She never laughed, never frowned either. Just calm, always calm, too calm. And Mama Nkem noticed something else. The animals avoided her. The goats that used to sleep near the kitchen began huddling in the far corner of the compound. The chickens clucked nervously when Ngozi passed. Even the compound cat, old and half-blind, hissed when she walked too close. Then came the smells. Sweet at first, like rotten fruit. Then bitter, like burnt herbs. At night, strange breezes slipped through the cracks in the hut. Breezes that carried whispers. Sometimes the clay pots would rattle softly for no reason. Sometimes the lamp would flicker violently, even though there was no wind. Mama Nkem stayed quiet. She watched. She listened. Then one night she heard something that shattered the little peace she had left. It was past midnight. The moon was high, casting long shadows across the compound. Mama Nkem, as usual, couldn't sleep. She sat on her mat, praying softly when she heard it. A voice. Not Obinna's, not Ngozi's. It was low, raspy, whispering in a tongue not spoken in Umudike, a language older than the village, a language of the earth and the bones beneath it. She crawled toward the back of the hut, where the window faced the small yam store. Slowly, silently, she peered out, and what she saw froze her blood. Ngozi stood in the middle of the compound, arms stretched wide, her head tilted back. Her eyes were rolled white, her feet slightly above the ground, as if lifted by something unseen. She was not alone. 3 figures stood with her. They were cloaked in shadow, their outlines barely visible, their voices whispering into the wind like dry leaves. Mama Nkem could not move. She could not scream. Her throat closed as the realization washed over her. Ngozi was not human, not fully. Something had come with her, something ancient and hungry, and her son was sleeping beside it every night. When the figures vanished into the dark, Ngozi walked calmly back into the hut as if nothing had happened. But Mama Nkem did not sleep. She sat by her husband's grave until dawn, tears in her eyes, clutching the wooden charm her grandmother had given her years ago, a small carving of Ekwensu, the spirit that sees through deceit. In that moment, she knew this was no longer about marriage. This was about war. After the wedding, Umudike moved on as villages often do. The days passed, the rains came and went, yams grew fat in the earth, and the festivals of the new moon were marked with palm wine and laughter. But inside Mama Nkem's compound, the air had changed. It wasn't just the quiet anymore, it was the way Obinna moved. His steps lost their purpose. His shoulders, once upright and proud, now drooped ever so slightly. He began waking late, his eyes heavy like someone carrying another man's dreams. When she asked him how he slept, he'd say, "Well, Mama," but his voice would drift like smoke. There, but not whole. Then came the sickness. It wasn't the kind of illness the Dibias knew how to treat. Obinna would sweat in the cold of morning and shiver in the heat of afternoon. His appetite disappeared. His strength faded. And though Ngozi bathed his forehead and fed him herbs she claimed to know, his condition only worsened. Mama Nkem watched helplessly. She tried everything she knew. She boiled bitter leaf and ginger. She burned incense at the shrine. She even went to the old woman of Umuna stream, who had once healed a child believed to be cursed by a forest spirit. But nothing worked. Meanwhile, Ngozi remained the same, calm, polite, quiet, too quiet. She no longer fetched water. She no longer cooked. She spent her days sitting beneath the udala tree, combing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. And though the sun passed over her skin each day, she never seemed to tan. Her skin remained pale, smooth, untouched. One afternoon, as Mama Nkem swept the compound, she overheard a strange sound, a humming. Ngozi was singing. It was a soft, eerie melody. The words weren't Igbo. They weren't Yoruba or Hausa or any tongue spoken in the region. They curled through the air like smoke, wrapping around Mama Nkem's ears and settling uneasily in her chest. She dropped her broom. Ngozi turned to her and smiled. "Is something wrong, Mama?" Mama Nkem forced a smile back. "Just tired, old bones." But inside, her spirit was screaming. That night, she made a decision. She walked miles to the high priest of Ani, the same one she had avoided before. A quiet man with deep-set eyes and fingers stained with chalk and ashes. He listened to her story without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Your son has been bound. His soul is no longer his own." Mama Nkem's throat tightened. "What binds him?" The priest took a piece of charcoal and began drawing a symbol in the sand between them. "It is not the woman who came into your home. It is what came with her. She is a vessel, and your son is the sacrifice." Mama Nkem clutched her wrapper. "What can be done?" He looked up at her slowly. "It must be broken before the next full moon, or you will lose him forever." Her hands trembled. "Tell me how." He handed her a small gourd, tied with red thread. Inside is a chant. When the spirit is strongest, when she reveals her true form, you must break this at your son's feet and say the words. But be warned, Nkem, if your heart is not steady, you may not survive what you see. She nodded. A mother's love does not fear death. When she returned home that night, the compound was silent again. Obinna was in his hut, curled up like a child whispering nonsense to himself. Mama Nkem held his hand through the night. She wept in silence, not wanting to wake him, not wanting him to see the fear in her face. Ngozi sat beneath the udala tree the next morning, staring into the distance, unmoved by the cries of the hawk circling overhead. Something was building, and Mama Nkem knew the storm would soon arrive. She rose before dawn the next day, washed in the stream with bitter herbs, tied the gourd to her waist, and fastened the protective amulet around her neck. Then she waited. Because she knew now, this was no longer her home. It had become a battlefield. That night, Mama Nkem did not sleep. She lay still on her mat, her eyes fixed on the thatched roof above her, ears sharpened to every sound that came from outside. The wind was silent. The usual chorus of crickets and night frogs had stopped, as if the bush itself was holding its breath. In the stillness she heard it, a faint rustle, not from the animals, not from Obinna's hut, from the direction of the compound gate. Ngozi's hut. Then came the creaking of wood. Mama Nkem rose quietly, wrapping her wrapper tightly around her waist. She tiptoed towards the small gap in her wall that faced the front yard and pressed her eye to the crack. Ngozi was walking toward the forest. She was barefoot. Her white wrapper trailed behind her, brushing silently over the earth. But what sent a chill through Mama Nkem's body was not just that she was living in the dead of night. It was that her feet didn't touch the ground. She floated, smooth and unhurried as though time had no meaning. Mama Nkem wasted no time. She slipped out of the back entrance of the compound, clutching a small calabash of protective powder and the gourd from the priest. She kept her distance, walking under the cover of trees, her bare feet trained from youth to silence. Ngozi moved with purpose, deeper and deeper into the forest, past the old hunter's trail, past the sacred Iroko tree, past even the forbidden grove where no one dared farm or cut wood. And then she stopped. There, in a small clearing beneath a broken baobab, she began to hum. It was that same strange song, haunting, smooth, ancient. Ngozi raised her arms and began to chant. Her voice deepened, no longer soft and girlish. It became layered as though other voices spoke with her, through her. And then they came. Three figures, tall and dark, emerged from the trees. Their shapes were vague, more shadow than body, and their eyes glowed like embers. They surrounded her in silence, and she spoke to them, not in words but in vibration. Mama Nkem crouched behind a termite mound, her heart pounding like a talking drum, her breathing shallow, her fingers clutching the charm around her neck so tightly it dug into her skin. She leaned closer, trying to hear more. And then she heard a name, Obinna, repeated over and over in that haunting voice, offered like a gift, like a promise. The tallest spirit stepped forward and placed a hand on Ngozi's head. Her body trembled, and for a moment her skin flickered like a firelight. She changed. Her face became long, thin, her eyes completely black, her limbs stretched unnaturally. She was no longer a woman, she was a vessel. No, a mask for something older than the trees around her. Mama Nkem's mouth went dry. This was the thing her dreams had tried to show her. A dark being sent to steal her son's soul, wrap it in sweetness and drag it into the world beyond. She had seen enough. Carefully, silently, she began to crawl backwards until her hand brushed something cold. She turned. A fourth figure stood behind her, small, still, watching. It looked like a child, but its eyes were milky white. It opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Only a rush of cold wind that swept through the trees and extinguished the light of Mama Nkem's charm. She staggered back in terror. The forest shifted. And that's when Ngozi turned. Her head snapped to the left, unnaturally fast, and her black eyes locked onto Mama Nkem in the dark. There was no smile, no confusion, only knowing. Ngozi whispered something to the spirits, then began to float toward Mama Nkem, who scrambled up and ran faster than her old bones had moved in years. Through thorn and root she ran, clutching the gourd tight to her chest. Behind her, whispers chased her. Laughter. Not human laughter, but hollow echoes of what laughter should sound like. It scraped at her back and tangled in her hair. She burst into the compound just before cockcrow, breathless, body bruised, wrapper torn. But her spirit was burning with truth. She now knew what her son slept. She knew what those dreams had tried to prepare her for. She stumbled into Obinna's hut. He was pale, unmoving. His lips were whispering the same strange chant she had heard in the forest. Ngozi appeared in the doorway minutes later, calm as ever, her wrapper untouched, her feet dusty from nowhere. "Mama," she said sweetly, "you're awake early." Mama Nkem turned, eyes blazing. "I never slept." Ngozi tilted her head. "You should rest." "I will rest," Mama Nkem said, voice low. "When you leave this house." Ngozi's smile faltered for the first time, and Mama Nkem knew. The final battle had begun. Mama Nkem did not eat that day, nor did she drink. She sat on her mat in front of the compound, eyes fixed on the path that led to the forest. She did not speak to Ngozi. She did not answer the greetings of passers-by. The villagers watched from afar. Whispers grew. Something was wrong in Mama Nkem's house. Everyone could feel it. Obinna remained inside his hut, unmoving, whispering to things only he could see. At dusk, Mama Nkem stood up slowly, walked into her late husband's hut, and gathered his old hunting knife, the one he had used to kill a panther when Obinna was still in her womb. She tied it inside the folds of her wrapper and stepped into the kitchen. Ngozi was there, stirring a pot of soup. "Do you know who I am?" Mama Nkem asked quietly. Ngozi turned slowly, her face unreadable. "You're his mother. That's all that matters." "No," Mama Nkem said. "I am more than that. I am the daughter of Amaka, granddaughter of Ifeoma the Dreamer, great-granddaughter of Nwaninso, keeper of the fire pot of truth." Ngozi stared at her without blinking. "Do you know what that means?" Mama Nkem asked again, her voice rising slightly. "It means," Ngozi said softly, "you are in my way." In that moment the sky darkened, not with clouds but with something else. The wind stopped blowing, the birds went silent, the air in the kitchen thickened, heavy like sorrow. Mama Nkem's fingers twitched over the gourd hidden beneath her wrapper. "You won't have him," she whispered. Ngozi's eyes began to change. Slowly her pupils widened, swallowing the brown of her iris. Her skin shifted, turning darker, smoother, like river stone wet from the rain. Her smile faded. Then she said in a voice that was no longer her own, "It was already agreed. The pact was sealed the day he kissed me beneath the Udala tree." Mama Nkem's heart stilled. "What pact?" Ngozi raised her hand. A flame flickered above her palm, not from firewood or oil, but from breath. "From will," she said. "He gave himself to love, and love is a dangerous god." "No," Mama Nkem replied firmly, her voice breaking but strong. "He didn't give himself to you. He gave himself to a lie, and I will tear that lie from his spirit even if it takes my last breath." Ngozi stepped forward. Mama Nkem reached for the gourd. Ngozi raised her hand to stop her, and in that moment Obinna screamed from inside his hut, a sound not of pain, but of two souls battling for one body. Mama Nkem didn't hesitate. She ran to his hut, kicked open the door, and found him writhing on the ground. His eyes were open but black, his hands clawed at his own chest. His mouth was speaking two voices, one his own, the other something guttural and deep. Ngozi entered behind her, calm, controlled like a queen at a ceremony. "This is his choosing," she said. Let him go." Mama Nkem knelt beside her son, tears in her eyes. "My child," she whispered, "remember who you are. You are Obinna, my son. Your spirit does not belong to darkness. Come back." He cried out again. The shadows in the room thickened. The air pressed down like a weight. Mama Nkem took out the gourd. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She broke it on the floor. A bright flash burst from the ground. Light, not fire, not magic, but pure ancestral power, rushed through the room. Ngozi screamed, but her voice twisted into something inhuman, something that did not belong in the world of the living. She began to change again. Her arms stretched. Her face collapsed into shadow. She was no longer pretending. Obinna gasped, his breath returning. Mama Nkem began the chant the priests had taught her. Her voice was raw, her throat burning, but she chanted louder and louder until the walls of the hut shook. Ngozi fell to the floor. The light of the gourd seeped into the ground, carving symbols into the clay beneath their feet, symbols of banishment, of severance, of truth. Ngozi rose to her knees, snarling, "He chose me!" Mama Nkem stepped forward, "And I choose to unbind him." She reached into her wrapper and drew the hunting knife. One swift movement. She cut the red thread tied around Ngozi's waist, something no one had seen before. The thread burned and fell to the floor like a dying snake. Ngozi let out a final cry, not of anger, but of sorrow. The sorrow of being cast out, denied, forgotten. Then she vanished, gone, as if she had never been. The room fell silent. Obinna slumped into his mother's arms, breathing slowly, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "Mama," he whispered. She held him tightly. "Yes, my son, you are home." For 3 days after the confrontation, Obinna did not speak. He lay on his mat like a broken gourd, silent, still, and empty. Mama Nkem stayed by his side, wiping his face with warm water, humming lullabies from his childhood. Songs about moonlight and mango trees, about warriors who returned from battle, about mothers who stitched their sons' spirits back together, thread by thread. She knew the fight was not over. The body can heal, but the soul is another matter. Ngozi may have vanished from flesh, but her imprint remained. Obinna twitched in his sleep. He muttered her name, not with longing, but with fear. His dreams were still hers, haunted by laughter that didn't belong to any human. On the third night, Mama Nkem went to the shrine behind her compound. She knelt on bare earth, placed 7 white stones in a circle and called out, not to the gods of the village, but to her own bloodline. Her grandmother, her grandmother's mother, the women who came before her, who had survived darker nights and deeper magic. She cried as she prayed, "Take this weight from him. If a trade must be made, take from me instead." The wind stirred. The flame beside her flickered sideways. A warm breath passed over her face, like an unseen hand pressing gently against her skin. And then, silence. The next morning, Obinna rose. His voice was raspy, but it was his, truly his. "Mama, where is she?" Mama Nkem smiled softly, her face tired but full of light. "Gone, where she belongs." Obinna sat up slowly, looked around, and then broke down in tears. "I was inside my own head, but not alone," he whispered. "It was like someone wore my body like cloth. I saw her walking, using my name, touching you. I couldn't move." Mama Nkem held his hand. "You moved enough, my son. You came back." But she knew, she could feel it in her bones, the danger was not fully gone. Spirits like Ngozi's don't vanish. They wait, they watch, they whisper from beyond the veil, hoping to be remembered, hoping for an open door, and Obinna's door had been wide open. So she took one final step. That evening, she returned to the high priest of Ani, Obinna walking beside her like a shadow of his old self. He didn't speak on the journey, just followed her, quiet, thoughtful, unsure if he was free or simply drifting farther from a nightmare. The priest was waiting, as if he had known they would come. He looked at Obinna, then at Mama Nkem. "There is one more thing," he said. He handed Mama Nkem a small clay jar sealed with black wax. "Bury this beneath your compound tree," he instructed. "It will close the gate, but know this, gatekeepers do not rest. You must tend it every new moon, feed it kola, salt, and silence. If you neglect it, she may return." Mama Nkem nodded. She understood. Back at home, they dug beneath the udala tree, the same tree where Obinna had first kissed Ngozi, where the pact had been sealed without knowing. They placed the jar inside, covered it with earth, and whispered a final chant. And just like that, the weight in the air lifted. The goats began sleeping by the kitchen again. The chickens laid more eggs. The compound cat returned from wherever it had fled. Obinna began to heal, slowly. He spoke more, ate more, smiled again, but never about love. Not yet. Mama Nkem never spoke of Ngozi again. When the young women of the village teased Obinna, she said nothing. When the elders suggested a new bride, she smiled politely, then walked away. Because some wounds aren't visible, and some doors, once opened, never close all the way. And so every new moon, Mama Nkem would rise before the sun, walk to the udala tree, and kneel beside it. She would bury a kola nut in the soil, sprinkle a pinch of salt, and sit in silence, listening to the earth, to the stillness, to the stories that have no words. And each time she whispered the same thing: "You cannot have him. He is mine." Time passed, but it did not pass gently. Obinna had returned, yes, but he was changed. His eyes held shadows that didn't belong to this world. Some nights he would wake screaming. Some days he would drift into silence for hours, staring into the distance with a look Mama Nkem had come to recognize. He was remembering things he never lived. One night, during the Harmattan season when the air is dry and cold and the stars shine too brightly, Obinna came to her hut and stood in the doorway. "Mama," he said, "I saw her again." Mama Nkem's blood ran cold. In a dream, he shook his head slowly. "No, by the stream." She didn't speak. She just watched. And then she disappeared. Mama Nkem rose slowly. Her bones ached, but her spirit stood tall. The gate, she realized, had not been fully closed. Something remained unbroken. She went to the udala tree that night, dug beneath the roots with her bare hands, and found the jar the priest had given her, shattered. The seal was broken. Something had fed on silence, and now it was stirring again. So she did what only the boldest would dare. She returned to the forest, not out of fear, but because the story had to end where it began. She walked the same path Ngozi once took, past the hunter's trail, past the forbidden grove, all the way to the clearing beneath the broken baobab tree. She stood there in the moonlight alone. Then she said the name she had never spoken aloud since the night Ngozi vanished. Ngozi. The trees responded first. They rustled though there was no wind. Then came the voice. You called me mother. Ngozi stepped out of the shadows, not as a girl this time, but as she truly was. Her limbs were long and spectral, her eyes like polished stones. She no longer wore a wrapper. Her body was clothed in smoke and whispers. You broke the bond, Ngozi said, voice echoing unnaturally. But bonds don't break, they shift. Mama Nkem swallowed her fear. You came for my son, but I stand in his place. Ngozi tilted her head. A mother's sacrifice? How noble, how predictable. I did not come to sacrifice, Mama Nkem said, stepping forward. I came to end it. From her wrapper, she brought out a carved wooden mask, an artifact passed from her grandmother's grandmother. It was a face without eyes, without mouths, meant to trap spirits in silence. She held it high and began to chant. This was not the chant the priest had taught her. It was older, deeper. It came not from her mouth but from her bones. Ngozi screamed, a sound that split the air like lightning. The trees bent away, the ground shook, but Mama Nkem kept chanting, even as blood dripped from her nose, even as her hands trembled, even as her knees gave way. The spirit lunged at her, but it hit the mask instead. And in that instant it was drawn in, pulled into the wood like smoke through a crack. The mask burned in her hands. She dropped it, gasping, collapsing onto the earth. The spirit was gone. This time truly gone. No echo, no whispers, just silence. Warm, clean silence. She lay there under the stars, staring at the sky, breath shallow, heart steady. And then she smiled, because she knew Obinna was free. Mama Nkem returned to Umudike 3 days later. Her wrapper was torn, her hands scratched and raw, but her eyes, they were calm, not empty, not broken, just calm. She walked into the village without ceremony, no drums, no songs, but every face turned, every elder bowed slightly, every child stood still. Even the wind seemed to know that something sacred had just passed. Obinna was waiting at the compound gate barefoot, holding a bowl of warm pepper soup. When he saw her, his eyes filled with tears. He ran to her and dropped to his knees. Mama, he whispered, I felt it. The moment it happened, something lifted. She rested her hand on his head. It's over, she said softly. You're whole now. That night they sat by the fire in silence. No words were needed. The silence was no longer empty. It was full. Full of meaning, full of gratitude, full of all the things that only souls can say to one another. In the days that followed, Obinna returned to his old self. Not exactly the same, but better. He tilled the land again, laughed again. The girls whispered his name again, but this time he looked at them with caution, with a wisdom far beyond his years. He didn't rush, he didn't forget. And Mama Nkem, she lived each day like a prayer. Every new moon, she still walked to the udala tree. She still whispered to the earth, but not out of fear, out of respect, because she knew some things live beyond the eye, and some battles are fought not with strength, but with knowing. She began teaching the village girls stories, not just folk tales but truths, hidden lessons inside songs and proverbs. She told them of watching, of listening, of never letting beauty blind you to spirit. And when the mothers gathered to gossip or laugh over steaming pots, they often fell quiet when Mama Nkem entered, not because they feared her, but because they knew. She had walked into the night and returned with her child, and not every mother is given that chance. Years passed. Obinna married a gentlewoman from Umuna village. They had children, strong, bright-eyed boys, and a daughter who laughed like water over smooth stones. Their compound grew full again, not just with bodies but with peace. But Mama Nkem never told them the full story, not yet. Sometimes her grandchildren would gather around her as she sat beneath the udala tree, begging her for stories of old, stories of animals who talked, of heroes who fought thunder, of magic drums and clever tortoises. And she would smile, lean close, and say, "Not all stories are for the ears, some are for the heart, and some are for the bones." But one story, the one about Ngozi, the spirit bride, and how she nearly swallowed Obinna whole, she kept close. Not because it was too painful, but because it was too real. Because every mother at some point must face a choice to believe what the eyes show or what the spirit whispers. Too many mothers see their children walking towards something dark and say, "He's grown, let him learn." But Mama Nkem had learned the truth through blood and fire. Love does not mean silence. Love is not passive. Love is a war, fought in silence, in spirit, and in sleepless nights. She once told the young wives of the village as they sat plaiting each other's hair, "Your children will laugh with people you've never met. They will eat food you didn't cook. They will love faces you didn't choose. But your spirit must never sleep." And that was the secret. The one every mother should know. Not all danger wears teeth. Not all spirits knock. And sometimes the ones who say they love your child come to take more than love. So watch, pray, and never stop calling your child's name in the spirit world, even when they stop answering in this one. Because if your voice is strong enough, if your love is fierce enough, it can pull them back, even from the edge of the dark.